The morning Garrett Whitfield lost everything, a child he had never met saved him with a cracker. Not a meal, not a kind word. A single, slightly bent cracker pulled from the pocket of a coat, 2 sizes too big, offered by a girl who had no reason in the world to be generous, and every reason not to be. He would think about that cracker for years afterward. He would think about the small hand that held it out to him, steady and unhesitating, the way only children can be steady when adults have completely fallen apart. He would think about how he had been sitting on a bench outside St. Joseph's Hospital in Ottawa, still wearing his good suit from the board meeting that morning, and how he must have looked like a man who had everything, because he was wearing the costume of a man who had everything. And yet somehow this child had seen through all of it and found the truth underneath. She had seen a man who was starving, just not for food. Garrett had built Whitfield Capital over 22 years. He had started with a borrowed desk in a shared office on Elgin Street, a laptop that overheated in summer, and the kind of stubborn belief in himself that either destroys a person or makes them wealthy. In his case, it had made him wealthy. He had offices in Ottawa, Vancouver, and Calgary. His name appeared in the business section of the Globe and Mail. His firm managed portfolios for pension funds, university endowments, 3 provincial governments. He had a house in Rockcliffe Park with a kitchen his ex-wife had designed and never cooked in. He had a car that cost more than his parents had earned in 5 years combined. He had 2 grown sons who called him on his birthday, sometimes on Father's Day, and occasionally when they needed something. He had a personal assistant named Vera, who managed his calendar with military precision and once rescheduled a shareholder meeting because she noticed he hadn't slept properly in 4 days. He had, by every measure that he had been taught to trust, a very good life. What he did not have as of 11:47 on a Tuesday morning in November was a company. The board had called it a transition, reorganization, a strategic realignment of leadership to better position the firm for its next chapter. The language had been chosen carefully, the way language always is when the truth is too ugly to say plainly. What they meant was, we have lost confidence in you. What they meant was, the Meridian deal collapsed and took 18 months of growth with it. What they meant was, you are 58 years old, Garrett, and the partners we want to attract are 34, and they want someone who looks like the future, not the past. He had nodded. He had shaken hands. He had walked out of the building on Spark Street with his coat open in the November cold, and he had kept walking until he found himself sitting on a bench outside St. Joseph's with no idea how he had gotten there. He wasn't crying. He had told himself that much. His eyes were simply reacting to the wind. He didn't notice the girl at first. She was sitting on the far end of the same bench, her feet not quite reaching the ground, her coat a deep burgundy that had faded to something more like dusty rose. She had a backpack that was too full, the zipper strained at one corner, and she was doing homework, or trying to. With a pencil, she kept stopping to sharpen, using a small sharpener she carried in her palm like a worry stone. She was 11, maybe 12. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that had started the day tidy and was losing the argument with the afternoon. She had the kind of face that was serious without being sad, the kind of face that suggests a person has been thinking hard about the world for longer than most people her age. She glanced at him once, went back to her work, glanced again. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question startled him, not because it was unexpected, exactly, but because of the directness of it. No preamble, no polite hedging, just, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said. She looked at him for another moment with the particular skepticism of someone who has heard that word used as a shield many times before. "You've been sitting there for a while," she said. "Have I?" "About 40 minutes. I counted." He looked at her. "You counted?" "I was taking a break from my math." She said it matter-of-factly, as though timing strangers on park benches was a reasonable alternative to long division. "You don't look fine." Garrett almost smiled. It surprised him. "No," he said, "I suppose I don't." She reached into the front pocket of her oversized coat and pulled out a small bag with 3 crackers in it, the kind that come in the flat cellophane sleeve, the ones packed in school lunches. She held one out to him. "I'm not hungry," he said. "That's not really why I'm offering," she said. He looked at the cracker. He looked at her. And something in his chest, which had been hard and locked all morning, shifted. He took it. "Thank you," he said. "Sure," she said, and went back to her homework. Her name was Adeze, No, that name had been used before. Her name was Simone, no. Her name was Nora, no. That one too. He learned it eventually, in the way you learn things from children who are careful with trust, slowly, in pieces, over several conversations on that same bench over the following days. Her name was Blythe. Just Blythe, she said, when he asked for her last name. The way she said it suggested that the last name was something she preferred to keep in her own pocket for now. She was 12. She was in grade 7 at a school nearby. She came to this bench, she explained, because her grandmother had an appointment at the hospital every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, and the waiting room was too loud and too warm, and she couldn't concentrate. The hospital bench was better. The cold kept her awake. And there was a maple tree nearby that she liked, even in November, even bare. She liked the way the branches made patterns against the gray sky, like a drawing someone had started and not finished yet. Garrett found himself coming back. He told himself it was because he had nowhere else to be. Which was true, in a hollow kind of way. His calendar, for the first time in 22 years, was empty. Vera had called twice. His sons had not. The house in Rockcliffe felt like a stage set for a life he was no longer performing. But the bench felt real. The cold felt real. And Blythe, with her careful questions and her nearly finished crackers and her earnest observations about bare maple trees, felt more real than most things he'd encountered in a long time. "What do you do?" she asked him on the third day. "I used to run a company," he said. "What kind?" "We managed money. Investments. We took money from large organizations and helped them grow it." She thought about this. "So you helped people with their money. In a sense, do you miss it?" He had been asked this question by his lawyer, by Vera, by an old colleague who called to express sympathy in a tone that was more curious than kind. He had given all of them a version of, "It was time for a change. These things happen. I'm exploring what comes next." He had said it so many times it had started to feel like something he believed. But Blythe was looking at him with that serious, undecorated gaze. "Yes," he said, "I miss it very much." She nodded slowly, as though this was an acceptable answer. "My grandma misses her garden," she said. "She can't keep it up anymore." Her hands. She paused. "She says the missing is worse in autumn because everything's dying anyway and it sort of all adds up." Garrett was quiet for a moment. The bare maple made its unfinished drawing against the sky. "Your grandmother sounds wise," he said. "She is," Blythe said. "She's also very stubborn and she makes me eat soup I hate." She picked up her pencil, but mostly wise. It was the end of the second week before Garrett understood the shape of things more clearly. He had arrived at the bench earlier than usual. He had been sleeping badly, waking at 5 a.m. to the particular silence of a house that has forgotten its purpose, and he found the bench empty. He sat. He waited, not sure why, and felt slightly foolish for it. Blythe arrived at 3:45, later than usual, and something in the way she walked told him the day had been hard. Her braid was unraveling worse than usual. She sat down and opened her backpack with a kind of mechanical efficiency, the way people do when they are trying to by keeping their hands busy. "Bad day?" he said. "Bad week," she said. She pulled out her binder, opened it, stared at it. "Grandma's sick. More than just the usual." Garrett waited. "They want to keep her an extra night. They found something." She said it carefully, each word placed like a stone in a path across uncertain ground. "Something they want to look at more. I'm sorry," he said. "She told me not to worry." Blythe's voice was steady, but her pencil had stopped moving. "She always says that. She said it when we had to leave our apartment. She said it when she had to stop driving. She said it every time." She paused. "She said it so many times I can't tell anymore if she really believes it, or if she's just saying it because it's what you say." Garrett understood this more than he had expected to. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "the two things are the same. Sometimes you say it until it becomes true, and sometimes it doesn't become true." "Yes," he said, "sometimes it doesn't." She looked at him. It was the first time he realized that he had not offered her something soft and reassuring. The first time he had told her the truth of a thing instead of the comfortable version. She seemed to appreciate it. She went back to her binder. They sat together in the cold in the particular companionship of two people who have stopped pretending. "She raised you," he said after a while. Not a question. "Since I was 4, she said. "My parents moved out west, oil work. They were going to send for me when they got settled." She turned a page. "That was 8 years ago." The sentence landed like a stone in still water. Garrett looked at her profile, steady, unbothered, or performing unbothered so well it had become its own kind of steadiness, and felt something that he recognized, after a moment, as shame. Not for anything specific, or for everything. He wasn't certain which. "I had 2 sons," he said. "They were raised mostly by their mother. I was working." He stopped. "I told myself it was for them. The working, the money, the company, all of it. I told myself I was building something for them." "Were you?" "I thought I was." He looked at the maple. "I think mostly I was building it for myself and calling it for them." Blythe considered this without judgment. "Grandma says most people's real reasons are buried under their stated reasons," she said. "She says that's not always bad. She says sometimes you don't know your real reasons until something goes wrong." "She really is wise," he said. "She reads a lot," Blythe said, as though this explained everything. And perhaps it did. The call came on a Thursday. Garrett had his phone out, scrolling through messages he had been not quite answering for 2 weeks. Emails from former colleagues, an inquiry from a headhunter, a voice message from his older son that he had listened to twice without responding. When Blythe arrived at the bench already in motion, her backpack bouncing, her expression the particular blankness of a person holding something very heavy. She sat down. She put her bag between her feet. She did not open it. "They're keeping her longer," she said. "There's a specialist they want to see her. He's not in until Monday." Garrett put his phone away. "Okay," he said. "The nurse asked me if there was someone I could stay with." Her voice was measured. "I said my grandmother was my someone. She said she understood, but that wasn't what she meant." She pressed her lips together. "I know what she meant. I don't really have an answer for her. Where will you stay tonight?" "Our building manager, Mrs. Kowalski, said I could stay with her for now. She's very nice. She smells like cats." She said this without complaint, simply a detail. She stopped. "I just want Grandma to come home." It was the first completely unguarded thing Garrett had ever heard her say. The first sentence that did not have the protective coating of practicality and self-sufficiency that she wore like a second coat. He did not say she will be fine. He had heard her on that subject. "Of course you do," he said. And he meant it the way you mean things when you have finally stopped trying to be helpful and started trying to be honest. He drove her to her building that evening. She accepted this without ceremony, the way she accepted most things, and on the way he found himself talking, not performing talking, not the polished version of himself that he had been giving to the world for 22 years. Actual talking. He told her about the day the board had let him go. He told her about walking in the cold with his coat open. He told her about the bench. He told her he had not been doing well. "I know," she said. "You knew from the beginning." "I told you," she said, watching the street go by. "You didn't look fine." He spent the weekend thinking. He had spent a lot of weekends over the past month not quite thinking, scrolling and drifting and reorganizing his study as though the right arrangement of objects would restore a sense of order. But this weekend he actually thought. He thought about Blythe's grandmother, whose name he still didn't know, lying in a hospital bed with a specialist coming Monday. He thought about Blythe sleeping at Mrs. Kowalski's, surrounded by the evidence of other people's cats. He thought about an 11-year-old girl who had been her own person for so long that asking for help felt like a language she had never been taught. He thought about what Blythe's grandmother had supposedly said. Most people's real reasons are buried under their stated reasons. He had told himself he came to the bench because he had nowhere else to be. He thought perhaps that was the stated reason. He called his older son on Saturday evening. Not in response to the voice message. He called first this time, without waiting for a reason. His son, whose name was Cormac, answered on the third ring with a slightly cautious tone of someone not sure what the call is for. "Dad," he said. Hey, Garrett said. And then, because he had decided to try telling the truth more often, "I'm not doing all that well, actually. I thought you should know." There was a silence, not an empty one. "What's going on?" Cormac said. And Garrett told him. He didn't tell him everything. He didn't mention Blythe, because he wasn't sure he had the words for it yet. But he told his son about the board, about the months of uncertainty before it, about the house that felt like a stage set. He told him he had been sitting on a bench outside a hospital for 2 weeks and that this was, somehow, the most honest he had felt in years. Cormac was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said finally. "I didn't let it show, no." his son said. You never do. They talked for 45 minutes. Garrett couldn't remember the last time they had talked for 45 minutes. On Monday morning, he was at the hospital before Blythe's grandmother's appointment with the specialist. He had told himself he was only going to check, to sit on the bench, to be nearby in case Blythe needed something, the way you sometimes need to be nearby for someone without quite being able to say why. He was sitting on the bench when Blythe came around the corner with a woman beside her, not tall, a little stout, with the careful walk of someone whose joints complain in the cold. She had silver hair pinned back the same way. Blythe wore her braid, though neater. She had Blythe's eyes, or Blythe had hers, the same thoughtful, unhurried attention to the world. Blythe saw him, and her face did something small and complicated, not quite surprise, not quite relief, something in between. "Grandma," she said. "This is Garrett. He sits on the bench." Her grandmother looked at him with the same direct gaze Blythe had, the family resemblance unmistakable. "You're the bench man," she said. "I suppose I am," he said. "She talks about you." She extended her hand. "I'm Vivian Osei." She paused. "My granddaughter says you gave her company when she needed it." Garrett thought about this. "I think it was the other way around," he said. Vivian looked at him for a moment with the appraising attention of someone who has lived long enough to know when a person is telling the truth. "Sit," she said, as though she were in her own kitchen. "Tell me who you are." He sat, and he told her. Not the board version, not the curriculum vitae version. He told her about Elgin Street, and the borrowed desk, and the stubborn belief, and the 22 years. He told her about the Meridian deal. He told her about walking in the cold with his coat open. He told her all of it, more or less, the way you tell things to people who look at you like they have time and patience and would notice if you left anything important out. Vivian listened. Blythe listened too, though she pretended to be doing her homework. "And now?" Vivian said, when he had finished. "Now I'm figuring that out," he said. "Good," she said, as though this were the right answer. "Figuring out is underrated. People are always in such a hurry to have it figured." She looked at her granddaughter. "This one will be fine, you know. She's like her grandfather, very sure of herself." "Grandma," Blythe said without looking up. "She is." "Yeah," Vivian said to Garrett, as though Blythe hadn't spoken. "She worries I don't know it. She thinks I need looking after." She folded her hands in her lap. "What I actually need is for my doctor to stop finding things to look at on my scans. But that is apparently not negotiable." "What did the specialist say?" Blythe asked. The homework was abandoned. Vivian was quiet for a moment in a way that was not evasive exactly, but was choosing its words. "He said the same thing my doctor said last week," she said. "And he used more words to say it, which I suppose is why they pay him more." She reached over and put her hand on Blythe's knee. "It is manageable, my love. It requires managing. Those are different things than being fine, but I am not done." Blythe covered her grandmother's hand with her own. They sat like that for a moment, the three of them on the bench, and the bare maple overhead made its unfinished drawing against the November sky. The phone call Garrett made that afternoon was not the one he had planned to make. He had spent the past 2 weeks intermittently drafting, in his head, the conversation in which he called his former partners and proposed something. A consulting arrangement, a smaller fund, something. He had drafted it and redrafted it and never made it, because each draft contained, somewhere inside it, the hope that they would tell him he was still needed in the way he had always been needed, and he was not sure he could survive finding out he wasn't. Instead, he called a woman named Philippa Dorset, whom he had known for 15 years, who ran a small non-profit advisory practice out of a shared office on Bank Street, who had offered him coffee and conversation 3 weeks ago when all of this happened, and whom he had avoided calling back because her work had always seemed to him, and he was not proud of this, like something people did when they had run out of better options. "Garrett," she said when she picked up. "I wondered when you'd call. I'm sorry it took this long," he said. "Don't be. These things take as long as they take." He could hear her settling into her chair, unhurried. What changed? He thought about Blythe. He thought about a cracker in November. He thought about Vivian, saying figuring out is underrated. People are always in such a hurry to have it figured. "I think I finally figured out what I was actually building it for," he said. Philippa was quiet for a moment. And it wasn't what I told myself," he said. "And I'd like to try doing something where the stated reason and the real reason are the same thing, for once. "Well," said Philippa, "I have some ideas about that," he told Blythe the following Tuesday on the bench. He had brought coffee for himself and a hot chocolate for her, which she accepted without comment, wrapping both hands around it and leaning her shoulder against her too full backpack. "I think I'm going to do something different," he said. "I'm going to help organizations that don't have money manage what they do have. Non-profits, community groups, the kind of work I spent 20 years ignoring because I was too busy thinking it wasn't serious." Blythe considered this. "Why did you think it wasn't serious? Because it didn't make money." "That's a weird definition of serious." "Yes," he said, "it is." She took a sip of her hot chocolate. A sparrow landed near their feet, considered the situation, and departed. "Grandma's doctor says she can manage at home," Blythe said, "with adjustments." She said the word carefully, the way you say words you've borrowed from adults. "She needs help with some things. We're working on that." "Good," he said. "I told her about you," Blythe said, "more than what she heard on Monday, about the bench and the crackers and all of it. What did she say?" Blythe smiled. It was not the small, careful smile she offered when she was being polite. It was the real one, the one that changed her whole face. "She said you sounded like someone who got lost and found a better road," she said. "She says that happens sometimes. She says the people who get properly lost are often the ones who end up somewhere worth being." Garrett looked at the maple. "Bare still, but not empty, not the same as empty. Your grandmother," he said, "really does read a lot." "Constantly," Blythe said. "It's a little ridiculous." She picked up her pencil, "but she's usually right." The wind moved through the branches overhead, carrying the particular cold smell of a Canadian November, wood smoke and lake water, and the promise of snow. Garrett Whitfield sat with a 12-year-old girl on a bench outside a hospital and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like something was beginning rather than ending. He didn't have a word for it yet. He didn't need one. That was enough.